Hello, this is Clayton from Serata, and today we're going to have a look at using Serata's Data Migrator to migrate HDFS data from a on-premise Hadoop cluster, as well as Hive metadata, to AWS, both in an S3 bucket for our HDFS data being migrated, and to a Glue catalog for the Hive metadata that we're going to move across. Starting off with our source cluster, we're working with a database called CARS. It has a simple table called inventory. I've done a describe on that. And that shows us that the location of the data in HDFS is in the user Hive warehouse directory. So we'll need to migrate the contents of that to begin with. If I just do a quick query against this table to see what's actually in there, we'll see it's quite a simple table. There's 3 cars, a Bronco, an Explorer, and an F-150. And we'll look at migrating those up into AWS Cloud here shortly. Looking at the Serata Data Migrator UI itself, and I will call out that although we do provide this UI to work with, we do have our own command line, and equally, you can use REST API calls against us. We do expose an API fully for you to programmatically control things. The Data Migrator itself works on the concept of agents, either file system agents or metastore agents. And if we look at the various file system agents that we have, we see we've got various agents. One is an auto-discovered source HDFS. So when we install on an HDFS cluster, the software will automatically try and detect the settings and log in and authenticate. If it's Kerberized, you'll need to provide a principal and a key tab for the Data Migrator to run as. But once that's done, it will authenticate and show up as a green and healthy agent. From the point of view of an S3 bucket, if we were to add a target file system, I can drill in here and I can see the sorts of things that we're going to be asked for. I can see that it wants a bucket name, it wants the type of authentication. I've chosen access key and secret key, but there's multiple different authentication types that we support. We provide those keys, we provide the endpoint, and if there's any additional key pair values that we want to provide as part of our authentication process and connection process, we can certainly do so. In terms of metastore agents, it's a very similar concept. You can see here, I've got my agent for Glue. When I add a metastore agent, it will associate it with a particular file system, in this case, my S3 bucket. We can see it's asked me for my access key and secret key again. I provide those. I provide the service endpoint. If you're not sure of the service endpoint, you can click this link and it will take you to the Amazon documentation, and that will provide you a list of endpoints that you can choose from to fill this field in here. You choose your AWS region, any override settings that you want, and you're pretty much ready to go at that point. In terms of migrations, we can go in and we can create our data migration, and the migration name, we'll call it CARS. And the target file system is going to be our S3 bucket. We are migrating, as we saw before, the user Hive warehouse CARS DB folder. And we can see that this path mappings option has a 1 listed in it. Now, what I've done is I've configured a path mapping that's going to translate anything from user Hive warehouse in my Hadoop environment to a folder called databases in my S3 environment. And if we look at my S3 bucket, I'm at the root of that bucket, and we can see that I don't actually have that databases folder there. This function is kind of useful if you're wanting to clean up a file system, reconcile certain differences, or just basically change the way you're organizing your data in S3. We all know that over time, HDFS can become quite, overburdened, and various different naming conventions come into play over the years. And this is a way to reconcile those sorts of things. We can configure various exclusions if we don't want to replicate certain types of content. I haven't configured anything specifically here. I'm going to choose a live type of migration. And what this is going to allow me to do is not only migrate the data that we have within this user Hive warehouse CARS DB folder, but anything new that happens after the migration will detect and migrate that data up into S3 as well. We've got some skip or overwrite settings. So if we're starting with a fresh bucket, we could overwrite, or if we're worried about deleting data, we can do a skip size match. I'll just leave that as is for now. We can prioritize migrations. So if you have some data that you need to get into S3 in this case more quickly, you're able to do so. I can then tell the migration that I want it to automatically start when I create it. And I click create. And what we should see here is a little bit of progress where we're actually showing that we're moving the data. So that's the data being moved into AWS S3. In terms of metadata migrations, it's a very similar process. We'll give this a name. We will give this the source of the source agent, glue, and we've got a bunch of predefined rules that you can customize and create yourself. I've created one that any pattern match on a name of cars is going to be a Hive rule that we're going to respect. And I would again click start automatically. Before I do that, I'll just do a quick query within Athena, which is reading my glue catalog. And I can see here that I only have a default database. So now I'll go in, that's automatically going to start. I'll click create. And we'll see here that we have a metadata migration. The current status is basically warming up. Now it's gone to a live status. If I go into my S3 bucket and I refresh this, I can see I now have a databases folder. And if I drill down into that, we can see that one text file with, the three forwards that we looked at in the initial view when we were looking at it in Q. If I now go and run a show databases again, you can see here now that I have, the cars database has been migrated. If I refresh this, I can switch to cars and I can run a select star from inventory. And we should see that we've got the same three cars show up in our Athena view of the data. So that's migrating pre-existing data. This could be petabytes and petabytes of data that we scale to. Obviously, I've kept the data volumes here small for the sake of time, but this demonstrates the movement of pre-existing data. And I haven't had a lot to do in terms of setting all that up. I've literally just set up a data migration rule and a metadata migration rule. Now, at this point, we want to demonstrate, obviously, putting new data into our inventory table. So I'm going to actually insert from HDFS another text file into this table. So I'll do that now. And that's been inserted. So now if I select star from inventory, and we'll go ahead and run this, we can see that I've actually added 3 Subarus into this environment. And if I go up into Athena again, and I run this same query, we can see that the Subarus have also been migrated up. So this is both a metadata migration and a data migration. And I can certainly go back into the CarsDB inventory folder and see that I've got that second text file that we just inserted using Hue on premise. So I hope you found this useful. And if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to any one of your contacts at Serata. Have a very good day.